Hello everybody, Matt, aka Machinimax here, recording for the Star Wars Blaster Building group on Facebook, and welcome to my workshop, the place where many of my childhood dreams become reality. So, why am I here today? Well, I have been contacted by our esteemed founder Dino, and he asked if I could do something pretty exciting for you guys. He requested if I could create an instructional video in which I can show you guys how to properly prep one of these. Here we have a Denix, and I'm going to show you guys how to properly prepare this thing for an electronics install. This applies for any sort of DL-44 blaster you can create, anywhere from a New Hope style all the way up to The Force Awakens. So I'm going to divide this up into two parts. The first part, which is the video you're watching now, is going to show you how to properly prep the Denix for the electronics install. This is going to include what parts you're going to need and the tools you're going to need. In the second video, which will come at a later date, I'm actually going to do the full-blown electronics install, the soldering, the installation, everything, and show you guys how you can piece that all together, and hopefully that'll become a really big help for those of you trying to fit electronics into one of these guys, because as many of you know, space inside the Denix is really limited. So hopefully this will be a very instructional video for you guys and will help you to make your blasters more awesome. Alright folks, let's get started. So before we get started, I just want to point out that the Denix that I'm going to be featuring for the install has already been prepped and ready to receive the electronic components. So I'm not actually going to be videotaping the processes of actually machining the blaster, but rather I'm just going to show you what the end pieces look like so you know what to create as for the final product. So I think the first thing we're going to discuss is the parts that you're going to need. So first things first, of course, you're going to need the Denix itself. So here I have one, as you can see, as it would appear right out of the box. As you can see, I've already done a little bit of work to this one, but that's just because I swapped out these two main bodies here. But that's a story for another time. But in any case, we'll just pretend that this is a brand new Denix fresh out of the box. Depending on what blaster you're going to need all your different pieces, so your scope, your flash hider, etc., etc. Now, of course, that's going to vary depending on what blaster you're trying to build. In this case, since we're doing a New Hope blaster, I, of course, need the bull barrel, the flash hider, the scope and scope mount, the crossbar, and the grill, and then, of course, the mystery disc, and I believe that is about it. Okay, the kit that you see here, this is the Dark Energy Creations kit, the aluminum / pewter cast alloy kit. With the exception of the flash hider here, the flash hider actually is the one from Todd's costume. So everything here is aluminum with the exception of this, which is steel. As far as the internal components go for your electronics, obviously you're going to need some form of soundboard, and of course the most popular one being the Plector Labs Blaster Core. This is the Blaster Core version 4. Now I know the Blaster Core version 5 was just recently released, and I have acquired one of those, but the Blaster Core version 5 is actually going to go in another project of mine. The version 4, however, has the same pin layout as the version 5, so you can pretty much follow along with what I'm doing if you're using the version 5, and it should still work. But here's our sound card ready to go. You can see it's already been pre-tinned in a couple spots, but we'll get more on that note once we actually get there. Next, you're going to need some form of switch. I like to use this guy here, one of these little lever switches. Now, the way I mount it inside my blasters is this is a custom part that I designed in my favorite CAD program and then 3D printed using my printer at work. Now, this I specifically designed to fit in any Denix blaster, no matter what style you're creating, whether it's ESB, A New Hope, Force Awakens, Return of the Jedi. This is meant to fit inside of a Denix and accept one of these kind of switches here. It has a nice mechanical fit to begin with, but I do like to secure it with a little bit of hot glue. This particular switch mount is posted on my Shapeways page, so it is available for purchase there. So if you'd like to get your hands on one of these, I will post a link in the video description below, and you are more than welcome to pick one up, folks. That's what it was designed for. Alright here, next component up, a recharge port, because we are going to be doing a rechargeable battery. So here we have our port with the kill key. I'm going to try, there we go. So here's our kill key to cut the power when the blaster isn't in use. And then, of course, we have our speaker. Now, there are multiple speakers that you can use. You can use the 28mm speakers like this. This is the premium speaker here, about 1.5 watts. I love these. These are absolutely quality speakers. I acquired them from the Custom Saber shop, which is exactly the same place you can get the blaster core from, as well as the recharge port. You can also use a speaker like this. You don't really have to use one in a Denix because you can create the room, but this is just a nice little 20mm speaker. These are particularly good in very smaller blasters, or if you're into lightsaber building, sabers that have very small inner diameters. So this is a possibility as well. And then I don't have one handy, but the other option you can consider is, rather than using a premium speaker like this, is to use one of the base speakers. But in my opinion, I think this is the best speaker to work with. But in the end, the speaker you choose is going to be up to you. Now lastly, you are going to need a power source, and in this case I like to use a lithium-ion battery pack like this. Now, as I said, the space in Denix is very, very limited, so I had to use the smallest lithium-ion pack I could find. And that was using cells that were the size of AAA batteries. So these are, if I'm correct, I believe the number is 10440. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but either in an annotation or in the video description below, I will provide the exact number for these lithium-ion cells. But essentially, these lithium-ion cells are AAA sized. Now, normally a pack this small isn't very commonly found, so I had to create it on my own. So in this case, I won't be doing the actual assembly of the battery pack in this video, but I might in a later date do a battery pack creation video. So we'll see what happens a little later down the road. But here's my power source. It is the lithium-ion battery pack, AAA size, 7.4 volt. And I believe that just about does it. So now you guys had a chance to take a look at all the things that we're going to need. I think we are now going to start taking a look at the prep work. Now the first thing you're going to have to do to prep the Denix is to disassemble it. Now in this video I'm not going to disassemble this Denix. Reason being is because there are already at least 2 videos out there. If I'm correct, one was done by Todd from Todd's Costumes. The other one was done by Boba Dett from the RPF. So I'm going to be providing links to the disassembly videos below because they go into highly detailed disassembly. Like, they take out everything from all the sliders, the pins, the screws, everything. So I'm just going to be focusing on how to disassemble this into its 2 separate pieces, which is the bottom half of the main body here and then the barrel half here at the top. So the easiest way to do it is there's a screw right here at the bottom. You have to unscrew this, and then there's a pin right here on this side. And if you can kind of see it, pin right over here and another pin right over here. Punch those out, and then you get what you see here. The main body divided into one section over here, and then the top half separated into its section over here. So to prepare it for electronics, I think we're going to start by taking a look at the top half, since that's where the least amount of work needs to be done. Alright, so once you get this thing removed, now depending on what kind of blaster you're going to build, it's going to depend on what kind of modifications you need to make. And excuse me, I'm just going to get this focused in a little better for you guys. There we go. Alright, so if you're doing an ESB style or a Return of the Jedi style, like you can see I did a lot of work right here at the end of the barrel here. That's how I am able to slide the bowl barrel on, since this is going to be a New Hope style. But you're not going to have to do that if you're going those 2 routes. So if you're doing ESB or if you're doing Return of the Jedi, then don't worry about this. Or even if you're doing a New Hope Greedo Killer, don't worry about this, because those versions don't have the bowl barrel sleeve. Now we'll start here with the barrel. As you can see, I chopped it off enough so that way I would be able to slip my bowl barrel on all the way, so that way it sits flush with the end here. Trimmed it enough so that way I could hold it in place with a set screw, so I drilled and tapped a hole here, which allows the bowl barrel to stay in place. So that's held in place with a set screw. And then of course, this bolt here is what keeps the flash hider in place. So that's just the way I chose to do it. I believe you could set it up so that way this bolt could hold both the flash hider and the bowl barrel, but I just went for the security of just adding in the little set screw there, and in the end you don't even see it once the bowl barrel is slipped on. Now, in order to get this clearance for the bowl barrel, I had to do a lot of work using these hand files. Now, Scott JUA has an awesome video on our page where he did a live feed of working on some Denix barrels, and he loaded his up into a lathe and got beautiful, beautiful results in well, record time from what, at least in my experience. But if you don't have a lathe like I do, then it requires you to do it by hand, and that requires using tools like files. So I use like a simple hand file like this. I picked this up at Michael's, and then to help get some of the finer details, I used little jeweler's files like this. I also picked these up at Michael's. So if you're looking where to get these, that's one place I would look. That was about 3 hours of work, not to scare you guys, but it does take some time if you're grinding that down by hand. All I can say is just go slowly and be patient. My recommendation is to take something sharp, scribe a line so you know where to stop filing, and then just slowly work your way down. Alright? Now, this isn't a very common occurrence in every Denix build, but I did drill through the barrel so that way I could put lights in, as you can see here. Now, your typical, like, 3-4 inch drill bit is not going to be able to get through that barrel, even though I've cut this down about, I want to say about halfway, if we compare it to this barrel here. So, yeah, about halfway, give or take. So, you're going to need an extra long drill bit like this. This is an 8-inch bit. This is specifically, let me read my tube here. This is specifically a 7/64 inch bit, enough that I'd be able to get these 2 wires through. These wires are 28 on the American wire gauge. So, the way I drilled this hole was first, as I took my standard 3-inch drill bit of this same diameter, and I drilled the pilot hole as far down as I could. From there, I unloaded this guy from my drill press, put him into a vise, and then used a hand drill with my extended drill bit to drill through the rest of the barrel. Now, it's important that you go slow and you take your time, because it is possible that the drill bit might skew and come out where you don't want it to come out. Because even if you see here, if I pull this back, and hopefully you guys can see this here, my hole did not come out. I'm sorry, the lighting's kind of poor, but my hole did not come out perfectly centered there, and that was okay because you're not going to see that. But you want to make sure that you are taking your time on this, because if this did go too far off to the side, I could have possibly ruined my whole piece. So just make sure, if you are deciding to drill through the barrel, make sure you're taking your time and you're going very, very slowly so you don't make any mistakes. Now, the last thing you can do, this is optional of course, is that the bolt here, the stock bolt, is a little long. It actually isn't shaved down on this one. So you can see this is what it looks like right out of the box. It's a little, it protrudes a little more proudly than this one does. So I just put that onto the belt sander, sanded it down a little shorter, so that way it was a little more screen accurate. Of course, you could also do that with a hand file if need be, but again, of course, that will take a lot longer. But if you have a belt sander, that would be the perfect tool. Just again, when you're using any of those power tools, make sure you're taking your time, so that way you don't hurt yourself, and most importantly, so you don't ruin your workpiece. And actually, I should have reversed that. Most importantly, that you don't hurt yourself, and then of course, that way you don't ruin the workpiece. And then I also, for added measure, I did remove the finish on top of the bolt here. I know some people, like Scott, add in the extractor detail for an added touch, but that's entirely up to you. The extractor detail can be a little more difficult. I know he machines his in with a mill, so if you have those capabilities, then please feel free to do so. But in my case, I just removed the finish so it was a little more accurate, and then I'll see if I can get the extractor detail in there a little later down the road. Alright, I think that pretty much does it for the top half, so why don't we take a look at the main body next. So the bottom half of the Denix is going to require a little bit more time and care to prepare for the electronics install than the top half. So I think we're going to begin by starting with what I did on the outside, and then we'll eventually work our way in. Alright, so I'll start here because as many people know, with the Denix Mausers, Denix does include their that identifying diamond and their logo right here on this part of the gun. But obviously that's going to detract from the accuracy. Now, there's multiple ways in which you could remove this. Number one, and I actually learned this from a couple people on our group, is that because the Denix is made of a very, very soft metal, what you could do, if you want to do it by hand, is you could take a file similar to the ones that we used when we sanded down the bull barrel, and you can use that to very lightly scratch away the logo. That'll probably be the most time-consuming of the methods, but it can be done. The second method, and this is the method that I used, is I used my handy dandy Dremel here, which is probably one of my favorite tools in my arsenal. I'd probably be lost without it. And as you saw on the Dremel, I had a sanding wheel, but that's not exactly the piece that I use. Rather, I use pieces like this. This is a little grinding bit, and basically I just loaded it up into the Dremel, and then I lightly made passes back and forth until the Denix logo was completely removed. Now, you want to take your time, go slowly on it, so that way you don't mess up the piece. Of course, you can always, use the sanding wheel or use some sandpaper to help buff it out, but you also don't want to go too deep, so that way you're not scarring the metal. Now, granted, if you want to, it never hurts if you leave a few maybe like pits or dents. As you see here, I kind of left a couple pits and dents here on purpose. That's because even on the real Mausers, the machining wasn't perfect. There was actually mill marks left on this section here. You can see underneath the finish of the original Mausers. That being said, the third method would be to actually throw this onto the milling machine and then use the milling bit to just like kind of grind this away until you have a nice even playing field. I know milling again is the way that Scott does his, and I know he even intentionally leaves milling marks on this piece here to increase the accuracy of the piece. So that's entirely up to you. Again, if you want a clean look, go for the clean look. If you want the more accurate look with the mill marks and the pits, then by all means, do that too. Alright, next we'll do the mystery disc here. Very, very easy. All I did to create the mystery disc was just remove the original finish on the Denix here with some sandpaper. Now the question you might be asking is, how did I get it in a perfect circle like that? Simple. I used the stencil. Very simple stencil. This here I actually 3D printed, but there's an even easier way you can do it. If you have just like your standard, like a standard tracing stencil that, has different diameter circles on it, all you have to do is take the stencil, place it in the area where you want to create the mystery disc, and then same deal, just use your sandpaper to remove the finish from the Denix, and then that's it, done deal. And then if you're not even doing the A New Hope Hero Blaster, then you can just completely bypass this step. Okay. Real quick, since I actually forgot to mention, how did I refinish this area after scratching it up and removing the Denix logo? Best thing you can do is, if you're not refinishing the entire blaster, I know some people that like to remove the original finish entirely, then completely refinish it using paint or something different. What I do is I keep the original finish on the Denix, and then I patch it up with this stuff. Here we have Birchwood Casey Aluminum Black. Absolutely love this stuff, and it takes to the Denix metal superbly well. It'll blacken almost instantly. So I take a Q-tip, dip it in the solution, lightly apply it to the affected area, and then voila, that's it. Wipe it off, wet it with a little water because that neutralizes the chemical, and everything looks as good as new. And the nice thing about the aluminum black is that you can use it anywhere on the gun. So if you are doing some machining work and maybe you do scratch some of the finish that you didn't want to harm, then you can always use the Birchwood Casey for touch-ups. All right. Moving on to this side here. Here we have the two holes here for the crossbar. So there's the crossbar there. I know it's kind of fuzzy, it's just because of the way I have the camera focused, but those are the two holes that I used to mount it. The way I like to get this nice and center is the first thing I will do is I will just drill the one hole. In order to make sure that the hole goes properly where I want it to go, I use this sucker. It's my awl. So I center it in the location where I want to drill the hole, get a mallet to create a little dimple inside that the drill bit will catch on. Then once I've done that, I can then take the crossbar, line it up properly, and actually hold on, I'm just going to get these out real quick. Take the crossbar, line it up properly, and when I have it in the location I want, making sure that the crossbar runs parallel with this edge of the body. Once I do that, same deal. I'm going to take my awl, make my little indent, and then drill through with the drill press. Now, when drilling the holes for the crossbar here, very important to note that the one in the back, if you are doing the New Hope style or the Greedo Killer or the Force Awakens style, and you need to drill the second hole in the back here, you need to make sure that you do remove the hammer, otherwise the drill bit will go through the hammer and might possibly mess up the piece. So, in order to remove the hammer, it's exceptionally simple. There's a pin right here. The same way you remove the pins to remove the top half here, just do the same method, pull the pin out, and then this guy will slide right out, no problems, and then you can go ahead and proceed with your drilling. Alright? Optional work on the Denix here is that you could, for accuracy's sake and for comfort's sake, slim down the trigger A and then increase the gap in between the trigger guard and the hand grip here. Now on this, on the here's a stock Denix here, I didn't do that, so you can maybe you can kind of see the difference here between the two. It might not be too easy to see, but all I did was just use a sanding wheel just to kind of widen this up a little bit, enough that my finger can sit a little more comfortably in that groove. Then same deal, I just took a sanding wheel or the sanding drum on the Dremel and just slowly back and forth went on the trigger until I got it a little slimmer. Now, same deal, if you're going to reshape the trigger, I would highly recommend making sure that you remove the trigger from the main body as well. Same deal, it's got a pin right there. Remove that pin, you can take the trigger out, and then you can reshape it as you see fit. Now, you'll notice here on the blaster that I'm going to be doing the install in is that this part of the grip, you can see the handle here, the inside of the handle is wide open. Now when I just showed you this Denix not that long ago, you might have noticed it has this crossbar in the middle with this threaded hole. Now that's what it looks like straight out of the box there. And the reason that's there is so that way you can secure the grips. So here are just the wooden grips. Doesn't matter if they're the wooden grips or the synthetic grips, but what I do is, or rather what it does, is that the hole here is what secures the screw that keeps the grips in place. Now, in the sake of my Denix, I'm not using the stock grips. I'm actually using the accurate wooden grips that are made by Dark Energy Creation. So I'm using something completely different. So if you're using the Dark Energy Creation grips, then you're going to want to follow this step. If not, you can just completely skip past it. If you want the Dark Energy grips to fit on, this crossbar has to go away, and you're going to have to slightly widen the inner diameter of the grip here. So, to do that, what I like to do, and I don't have one handy, but once again, I do use my Dremel. I used a cutting wheel, a metal cutting wheel. I used the metal cutting wheel to initially chop off the crossbar there. Then I just use a combination of the sanding wheel and then grinding wheels in order to lightly and smoothly try to machine out this area here. Once that's done, the grip, the new Dark Energy grip, sits nicely in place, and then in the end it will be held by this screw which goes directly across. That's why you have to remove it, because it uses this one screw that goes directly across between both grips, and that's how it was on the actual Mausers. Alrighty, now if you have the Dark Energy Creation grips, you know that they do not come finished. So once again, another awesome tip that I got from Scott. In order to give these a really nice finish and a nice accurate finish too, best stuff to use is going to be this. This is called True Oil. It's also from Birchwood Casey, like the aluminum black. It's a nice when they made the original Mauser grips, they had finished them with linseed oil. So this is like a very, very similar process in which you can follow. And it's super, super easy to apply. All I did was put on a couple of gloves, and then literally I just massaged it into the wood. Massaged it into the wood, gave it about 24 hours to sit, and then I got the beautiful results that you see here. So if you are using the Dark Energy grips, then please feel free to go ahead and use this method, because you are going to get beautiful, beautiful results with it. And it just works as a nice wood finish in general, so I would definitely recommend picking up a bigger bottle if you can. Now, since we're on the topic of the grip, I actually do want to talk about the grips for the Denix. So here is a stock Denix wooden grip, and here is their stock synthetic grip. Now, if we look on the opposite sides here, the synthetic grip has a lot more internal room than the real wood here. Now, that being the case, since we are going to mount our speaker inside of the grip here, we're going to need to make a little bit of room in order for everything to sit properly. Now, there's not too much you need to do on the synthetic grips. If you see, there's these two nubs kind of like protruding here and here. If you take your sanding wheel on your Dremel, your sanding drum on your Dremel, and grind these down, you should have more than ample room to fit your speaker. Now, you might have to modify and play around with yours a bit, but as long as you get rid of these, you shouldn't have any problem getting the speaker. I'm probably also looking at this because you also need to make room for the recharge port. Yeah, you're also going to want to get rid of the nub right here, the ones that go in the back facing you. Otherwise, the recharge port isn't going to be able to sit in the grip, and I'll explain how we got that in just a little bit. So you will need to do a little bit of modifying on the grips, whether they're wooden or synthetic. For the wooden ones, same deal. I took my sanding wheel, made a little notch right there, so that way my recharge port could sit properly. And actually here you can see both of them, since I have the wooden grips modified. And then in here I had to carve out some space for the speaker. So the speaker sat in here like this, actually sat in here like this, and then even though I could have just machined out the one wooden grip and have enough room to put the speaker, but I did it on both sides only because that gave the speaker a little bit of resonance and allowed it to create more sound, or allowed the sound more room to vent. So I'd recommend doing it on both sides, enough so that way, again, you can get that resonance, and then you'll be pretty much set to go. Now, I'm doing the same thing to my Dark Energy Creation grips. I haven't completed them yet, but I'm basically doing the same process that I did to the stock Denix grips here. I'm creating a notch right here that's going to allow for enough room for the recharge port. Those are already done, but I still need to create the space for my speakers on both sides. So I haven't done that yet, but by the time I do the electronics install video, these will be ready to go. Alright, now going back to the grip on the main body here, you might have noticed I have a series of holes drilled here. These are about 1/8 of an inch, give or take, and these are for sound venting. They're on both sides, so I just took the drill bit and drilled all the way through, and then just touched them up with the aluminum black, since I revealed a little bit of the bare metal. Now here, as I said, is where we're going to put the recharge port. Now the way I did this, and this can be very, very tricky because of the awkward angle you have to drill this at. Now, what I did was I loaded this up in a vise, and then I created a block here. As you can see, I actually labeled it because I've actually been working on a couple Denixes recently, so I figured I might as well keep this for future use. I used this block here to help keep the frame upright, so that way this surface here, so that way this surface of the grip here sits perpendicular with my drill bit, allowing me to drill in a nice clean hole. From there, I do have to thread it. Now, the recharge ports sold from the Custom Saber Shop, or typically your 2.1mm recharge ports, like the one we're going to use, have a unique threading, not typically found in your everyday tap kit. So I had to order a special tap. This is a 5/16 by 32 tap. So I got this from eBay. You might be able to find it maybe at like a Harbor Freight or something, but I wasn't able to find it at a Home Depot or Lowe's or anything like that. However, if you do see it there, of course, feel free to pick it up, but I just thought it was easier to order this online. So got that from eBay, came in a couple days. Excuse me. From there I was able to tap the hole, and then once the hole was tapped, I can then, let's see if I can do it for you guys. I can then thread it nicely into my main body. There we go. Oh, hold on. And it's at a little bit of an awkward angle. You know what? I'm not going to mess around with that. We'll just do that later. But that will thread in there. No problems. And then I do make a little bit of clearance with the grinding wheel here and here, just so that way it allows the recharge port to sit flush with the grip here, and then a little bit of clearance in the back here, so that way there's enough room for the wires on the leads. Also here you can see there's two holes underneath the frame. Now one there is the one hole there is there naturally. It's for the spring that's attached to the hammer, but that doesn't leave me with a lot of room to lead the wires from the body into the grip, because there are a decent number of wires that have to flow from there into here. So again, just using a drill bit, and with the hammer removed, I just drill a hole going straight through the body, and now I have that extra clearance for my wires to pass. On the bottom here, you'll notice I have a small tactile momentary switch. Do not have one of those handy, I apologize. But that is what I use for the auxiliary button, so that way I can switch between the menus and the effects. Now I'm not going to lie, on my particular Denix, this is actually a static button. It actually isn't connected to the blaster core, because I always just use the same font anyway, the Han Solo style font with the pew pew noises. So mine isn't wired. I could do that if I want to, but I never change the font on this anyway, so personally I don't wire it up. But I would recommend, if you do want to change the fonts, making sure that you have the capabilities to hit the button. I'm going to see if I can shine a light in there, and then there it is. You can see the button inside there. Just hold it down with a little adhesive. Not going to lie, it is a little tricky to get it in there. Two-stage epoxy would be best because it cures nice and slow. Once you have it in position, you just give it a little time to set. It may take a couple rounds, and it's probably the most frustrating part of the install, but very, very well worth it. Alright, I think that does it for the outside, so I think we're ready to move in. There's actually not too much that has to be done on the inside. So the first was actually the hole that I drilled right here. The second part is machining clearance in between. And actually, let me get a little more light on this. Machining a little bit more clearance between this section and this section. So here is where the trigger is. So if I can pull that back there you go. So there you can see there's the lever moving on the trigger. And then here is on the Denix, this is, just like this hollow space here, but you got this wall here. Now this space here, which is where the ammo would go on the real Mauser, that's where I put the battery pack and the soundboard. So I need to make sure my wires are able to run from here to here and also into the grip. So in order to make that clearance, because like I said, basically there's a wall here, all I do, same deal, is again, I get this grinding bit, I get like this one here, or again, like the one I showed you earlier, and then I just use those to clear away some material. Enough that I can run the wires through, and then I leave a little bit of the wall right here on the side, so that way I can take my switch mount and fit it off to the side, and then it allows me to install that. And then I leave a little bit of room here, so that way the wires can pass in between. And let's see here. I believe that pretty much does it for this part. As you can see, my grill is already attached. That's just because, like I said, this is a rework. I did do the grill closer towards the end after the electronics install, so I'd recommend doing the same. You can put the grill on there right away if you want to, but I would just recommend waiting till the very end. It's really only there for aesthetics anyway. So I secured it with, again, the two-stage epoxy, and it holds like a charm. So, alright. So I think the last thing we're going to discuss before this video ends is I'm just going to show you guys a little bit of what I did to finish up and prepare some of the dark energy creation parts. So for those of you who might not be familiar with the Dark Energy Creations kits, they don't arrive finished. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a few moments to just explain a couple of the finishing processes that I've used in order to prep these parts for the final assembly. I think I'm going to start off with the bowl barrel, since that's actually the first part that I worked on when I received the kit. So I'm just going to get this in focus again. There we go. So the bowl barrel here was machined out of solid aluminum. Now I could have just easily just taken my black spray paint and done that, but I wanted to challenge myself a little bit, and I decided to blue it with the birchwood Casey. So that's what I did here. Now, not gonna lie, the process takes a while. So to get this entire thing chemically treated with the birchwood is going to take some time, so I would definitely make sure you set aside a couple hours for that. So it was a little bit of a pain in the neck, and it wasn't until after I had done this that I had learned that warm metal takes to the birchwood better than cold metal. So I definitely would have done that if had I known, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. But same deal as when I applied the birchwood to the Denix. Excuse me. Same deal, took a cotton swab and just lightly applied the birchwood until it eventually took to the bowl barrel. A little scratched up, marred, and weathered in some areas, but I did that on purpose. I wanted it to have a little bit of a used look, since this is supposed to be Han Solo's blaster, so that's what happened there. Here we have the two antenna greeblies and the T-track. I did that at the very, very end once everything else was assembled, so I would wait to do this, because then once you have the flash hider in place, then you know the exact length of the T-track to cut. Once that was done, all I did was paint these pieces and then secure all of them using the two-stage epoxy. Moving on to the flash hider. Now, as I said, my particular flash hider is not from Dark Energy Creations. Rather, this one is from Todd's Costumes. Now, again, if you get the Dark Energy Creations flash hider, it'll be bare metal, which you can choose to either blacken with the birchwood Casey or paint with spray paint, up to you. Now, the Todd's flash hider came to me anodized jet black, but I didn't want a jet black color. Again, I wanted that used look. So you can see here, I have this real used and dirty look on my flash hider here. To achieve that effect, in order to remove the anodizing, I learned a trick where if you take distilled white vinegar, put it onto a cloth or a paper towel, eventually it'll break through the anodizing and allow you to remove it. So you can see I did leave some of the anodizing, if I can get in proper lighting here. I did leave some of the anodizing in some of these little nooks and crannies here, but I intentionally wanted to make it look grungy and used. So some anodizing I had kept, but the rest of it I just kind of wiped away, and it really helped to give that nice used, like pewter kind of like grungy steel look to it. So I was very pleased with the results there. Alright, moving on next, we'll take a look here at the scope mount and crossbar. The scope is just pure aluminum, just like the bowl barrel. So if you want, you could blue that. Of course, that's going to take a lot longer because it's a much bigger piece. But again, I just opted to spray paint. Now, these greeblies here, so the knob on the scope and then the scope mount itself, that's made from a pewter cast alloy. So you cannot, I repeat, cannot use the birchwood Casey on those. So for those, I actually just chose to blacken it with the spray paint, weathered it a little bit, take a little steel wool or sandpaper, remove some of the paint. Did the same thing with the aluminum crossbar here, just painted it a solid black. Then used a combination of sandpaper, steel wool, and some pointy objects I had sitting around here at my table to kind of scratch up the finish and give it that used look. Let's see here. Moving on to, these are just the spacers that go in between the body of the Denix and the scope mount. These I just had done some birchwood Casey. I actually just dipped them in a little cup of birchwood Casey, took them out, and they were nice and used looking. These, the actual knurled knobs, for these I had decided to spray paint. I did birchwood Casey these originally, but wasn't a big fan, so I just painted them and then did the same deal, just kind of scratched and marred the paint using steel wool or sandpaper and whatnot. Now these threaded rods are separate from these, so I actually had to secure these with a little thread lock, so that way these became one piece. So just make sure, for security's sake, I would definitely recommend sizing up your bolts properly, and then thread locking them into the knobs here, so that way they become nice screw heads. And then the last part of the Dark Energy Creations kit again was the grill. This again is made out of the pewter cast alloy, so I just decided to spray paint it. Now I will make quick note on the pewter cast parts that since they are castings, you will receive them unfinished, so they will still have some pull lines and cast lines remaining on them. So before you actually go ahead and finish these with spray paint or whatever it is you're going to use, they are going to require a little bit more finishing work to get rid of those pull marks. So take a little bit of time with some sandpaper and some hand files. You'll easily get rid of that stuff, and then from there you can put it all together to make your beautiful blaster. Alrighty folks, so that should pretty much do it. Once all those steps are concluded, then you're ready to start installing the electronics, and that's going to be the focus of our next video. So thank you one and all for taking a look. Please feel free to use this at any time, share it with your friends. I will be providing in the description below, you will notice there will be links to different sections of the video, so that way if there's a specific part of prep work that you're looking for, you can search for it there rather than having to sit through this entire thing. Alrighty folks, thanks for taking a look, and I'll see you guys later.